Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Friar Friday. I'm Don Orsillo along with Mark Grant. Mud, how you doing?
Donnie, I'm doing well. I hope you had a good week. It's always good to catch up with you on Friar Fridays, and I'd like to welcome everybody watching. Thank you for joining in. So, hey, we're getting close. Another day off the calendar to where we're going to have baseball, huh?
Yeah, how about that, Mud? We are going to play baseball. It's going to be short. It's going to be quick. It's not going to be a marathon.
Right.
It's going to be a sprint. Heard all the analogies, but I think it's going to be fun. What do you think?
It will be fun. Even, baseball to me, whether there's no fans, at least it gives us to call some games and it gives fans to watch some games on TV. This is what everybody needs. Everybody needs a little bit of getting away from life for a while. And whether it's 2.5, 3+ hours to watch a baseball game, I'm all for it. And I think the majority of the fans that we've talked to over the years, they like hunkering down and watching a big league ball game, no matter what the situation is. So I think it's good for everybody.
Well, our third man in the booth or on Friar Friday is here, Jesse Agler alongside. And Jesse, your thought, well, first of all, welcome to the show. Second of all, this is exciting. Things are going to happen fast now, and we are going to have baseball, it appears.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again, guys, here on Friar Friday. I feel honored at crashing your party. And you're right, it's going to be completely different, but it should be kind of fun and exciting. You said it best, right? With the marathon and sprint analogy, we always use that in baseball about, the attrition of a long season, and 162 games really does help determine who the best teams are. It could get very, very goofy this year, and that means there could be opportunity. That means there could be things we've never seen before or things we haven't seen in a long time. Look, I think we all understand that 2020 is a really weird year for a lot of reasons. And there's no reason baseball shouldn't be weird along with that. So we're going to try and do some different stuff here and see how it goes.
Well, let's check out some of the tweets and things that are going on around baseball that you've looked at a lot of this week, really, on Social Hour.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the main thing, obviously, was that MLB implements this 60-game season. The players agreed to report by July 1st, which, of course, is Wednesday. They also did sign off on the health and safety protocols. Mud, that's obviously a big part of this as well, as these guys got to make sure that they maintain their social distancing, among other things. I think, that's important to keep mentioning to people. This is not only about, figuring out the dollars and cents of playing a 2020 baseball season, but also about, keeping everybody as healthy as possible.
They are working on this day and night. It might be even 24/7 to where they're going in shifts, because there is so much that has to be done. Protocols as far as going to the ballpark, getting in the ballpark, where you be able to go when you're at the ballpark. Are you going to be able to go with 2 or 3, maybe 4 players to the trainer's room, whatever the case may be? People are going over this with a fine-tooth comb in detail to get this right. And I think everybody is excited to get it going and making sure that they get everything right. Donnie?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of hurdles and hoops that the players are going to have to go through. They realize it. It's going to be a real challenge to be able to play the entire season and not have some sort of disruption because of the amount of players that are infected. So I think they realize they have to do this to even have a shot to do it. So I think everybody's on board with this.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, the wild thing, guys, right? The season, it looks like, for the Padres will begin on July 23rd or 24th. Now, in a normal year, the trade deadline is July 31st. Obviously, you can't really, I guess, have a trade deadline a week into the season. And so, Don, there will be a trade deadline. It will be at the end of August, just everything getting compressed.
Everything is like yesterday. I mean, everything's going to happen so fast. You're going to blink an eye and it's time down for the trade deadline. But I think it's so cool. They kept it in there. It's in the middle now. And the thing is, everyone's going to be in it. So, nobody's going to be too far out of it at that point. They can't be statistically. So I think a lot of teams are going to try to get better, which will be fun. I think this could be maybe the most fun trade deadline we've maybe ever had.
It's bizarre, right?
Funny,
because
guys. Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to say, you'll only be a month into the season, but at the same time, you'll be halfway through the season.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
I mean, it's
what I was thinking is that maybe a week or two into the season, it's like if you're kind of deficient in one area or something, you start looking at other teams. Oh my gosh, this guy, he's playing really well. Maybe, what are the things on maybe trading for this guy? How much service time does he have? He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. It's going to be great. Everything's going to be just bam, thrown on you all at once in a short period of time. I think it's going to be awesome.
That's exactly right. One of the other weird things, Mudcat, for this year will be the universal designated hitter. It
Mhm.
feels a little bit like this was a long time coming. There will be a DH in the National League for this 2020 season, not yet officially in 2021. That's a conversation for another day and time. But the Padres, like every other team in the National League this year, will have the designated hitter at their disposal.
It's going to be a chance for guys like Ty France, Josh Naylor come to mind, the power hitting left-handed hitter Josh, to get some ABs and be that DH, depending on who's going to be pitching that particular day. And we've had this discussion many, many times. I like the pitcher hitting. I like the thought of a strategy double switching, manager having to manage the bullpen. But I think it's just my opinion. I think that the DH, when it comes after the new CBA, I think it's going to be a universal thing. I hope it doesn't happen, but I think we're going to get a taste of it this year, which is cool. I mean, I'm all about, dealing with the change and stuff like that. I prefer the pitcher hitting to see that strategy, but I think the DH is inevitable after the new CBA.
Yeah, and from a Padre perspective, you mentioned a couple of guys who are going to be able to get some extra at bats. You'll be able to give kind of some rest days to regular players, and also hopefully keep your pitchers a little more healthy as well. Just one less thing for them to worry about. Not the only rule change, by the way, the DH for this 2020 season, with all kinds of strange things going on. Here's some other information in terms of the way the roster is set up. You'll start with a 30-man roster, then 2 weeks into the season, you lose a couple of guys, and then a month in, right around that trade deadline we just talked about, Don, it'll be down to 26, which was to be the normal number here, but an opportunity, I think, to take advantage of having a few extra guys at the start of the season.
No question. I think it really comes into play on the pitching side of things too, because keep in mind you're not going to have your normal 6-week spring training for pitchers to gear up for the beginning of the season and get to that 100-pitch plateau. So you're going to need a lot more pitchers who are going to come in earlier in games. So you're going to have a bigger bullpen, which is certainly going to help the Padres out a lot because their bullpen is so good and there's so much depth there. And they're, in the regular season, if we had not had this situation take place and started the year, Jayce Tingler and AJ Preller had some really tough decisions to make about some of the guys in the back end spots of the bullpen. Not anymore. Now you can keep those guys from going to El Paso. They can be on your roster to start the year, and I think that's a real bonus for the Padres really heading into this season.
I agree with that. And Mudcat, one of the other ones that has been talked about a lot in recent years, something we've seen in the minor leagues, is now coming to the major leagues. You get to the 10th inning, there will be a man on second to start the 10th inning.
I like it. Other games, major league games, hockey, football, basketball have evolved, right? Baseball is one of those that stayed the same throughout all those years. And I remember when this was first brought up, people were like, oh, you're crazy. But you know what, though? I kind of like it. And I think from a strategy standpoint, this is going to be one of those fundamental part of the games. Bunting, how many teams, what's going to be the percentage of teams starting with the runner at second base in the 10th inning, depending on where they start the lineup? That's another question probably, right? How many guys are going to be good at bunting to get that run over to third base with fewer than 2 outs in the go-ahead run on third base? So we'll see if that plays a big part in this, having the runner start at second base.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating, right? Because I think it's the guy that makes the last out of the 9th inning in the 10th is the one who goes to second base. Basically, he's just
Okay.
put there. It's an unearned run if he scores, so it doesn't impact the pitcher in that way. And you're right. I mean, if the number 8 hitter is the guy coming up, you might see that. But who knows? You go bunt, intentional walk to set up some forces. Who knows?
Yeah.
It'll definitely be a new and evolving strategy. Finally, guys, in terms of rules for 2020 and stuff outside of the ordinary, the elephant in the room, of course, is COVID-19, and that's the reason that we're having the situation that we're having. And so one of the things that they will have is a separate IL for COVID-19 issues. Guys who test positive or have confirmed exposure or have symptoms, they will not have to spend a certain minimum or maximum days on that COVID list. There will be obviously protocols before they're allowed to get back into the clubhouse and back into game action. But Don, just like another one of those stark reminders of kind of why we are where we are.
Exactly, and I think that's great. I mean, it just makes the adjustment, and I think it'll make it easier for guys to go in that situation where they can quarantine them, and then have a 14-day scenario, perhaps where they are quarantined, and it's not part of the IL situation. I think you had to do that. I think it was a must, and I really do think that they've taken into consideration a lot of different things that could happen here ahead of time, which may prevent things from happening and keep the game going and not having to have any kind of stoppage as a result of the number of tests that are proving to be positive. So I think all of these things are all good things, which is going to be very interesting moving forward this season. Different than any other year. There's no doubt about that. And there are a lot of different tweaks that players are going to have to go through, things they're going to have to do to get on the field, to get in the ballpark, to get each day, to get into the stadium, pass a test, be able to be tested many times. And they're ready for that, which I think is great. Well, we'll talk about more of this and the exciting season right around the corner for the Friars on this Friar Friday. We step aside and get back with more after this. Welcome back to Friar Friday. Well, certainly things are going to be different moving forward for the Padres and the Padres broadcasts. Mud, we think about it, we generally sit very close together. That's not going to work. Social distancing is going to be part of this. It's going to be part of, for us, part of Ted and Jesse. I mean, it's just the way the world's going to work. It's going to work for the players on the field. You and I are going to be apparently in the same booth. We are not going to be traveling, but it's going to be a different setup. You're not going to be able to get as close to me as possible there, Cha-Cha.
Well, Don, the great ones adjust, and I think we will do just fine. But it's an indication to everybody watching how important it is to social distance yourself. And I know we kind of make fun of it when we're sitting next to each other. And that tape in the middle of the desk, it's not going to be tape anymore. It's going to be a steel structure, I guess.
I prefer. I'll be quite honest. I prefer the steel structure. I rather it's much better than the tape that you keep moving.
We'll have more room. You'll have your own desk to where you can do whatever you want. And I think it's great. But the bottom line is, yes, we have to play by the rules. That's the protocol. And Jesse, tell you what, man, what's going to be like in the radio world?
Yeah, you guys have that huge booth, so you can both be in the same place but still be socially distanced. Our booth is a pretty good size, Ted and I, but not big enough to do that. And so, Don, in 2020, I will be living your ultimate fantasy. I will have my very own booth. Ted's going to be in our usual booth. I'll be next door in what is normally the visiting television booth, but with no visiting television announcers. It's open. So I'll be there. Ted and I will be able to sort of look at each other through the glass partition between the two booths. So we're able to communicate, sort of eye to eye and everything like that. But we'll be in completely separate booths. For home games and road games, we'll be at Petco Park. It will be very weird. It will be very different, but I kind of like the idea of having some space. I might get a mini fridge, a coffee machine, and really make myself comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
How did you work out that sweet deal? I mean, how'd you get your own room, your own booth?
Yeah. It's a negotiating skill.
You know what, though, Don? It's going to be different dynamics between Jesse's deal and Ted's deal. But are you going to be able to see Ted? Is there a glass partition between yours and the visiting TV booth? There is.
Yeah, there is. I think right now there's like a dark film over it. But we'll peel it off.
That's right. Yeah. But I think it's important to, because even during the regular season when Don and I are working together, there might be some downtime and nothing going on. And I kind of look at Don, get his attention, and kind of raise my hand to see I want to make a point or something. I think that's very important, even though we're going to be, away from one another, to have eye contact to where we can be on the same page if we want to say something. I think that's very important.
Well, we'll have that, but we'll also have a steel partition.
Yeah.
Well, we won't be the only ones.
I can take off my shoes.
Because I don't need to see you, actually, now that I think about it. Go ahead, Jesse.
I was going to say, we're not going to be the only ones adjusting to a different situation. Down on the field, it'll be a very unique circumstance as well. They're all trying to figure out, where players are going to sit, how many guys can be in the dugout, all that kind of thing. And so Jayce Tingler, in his first time ever as a big league manager, is walking into a little bit of a different situation, to say the least. And yesterday on Padres Social Hour, I got the opportunity to catch up with the Padres manager. Thanks for taking a few minutes for us. I know things very busy there at Petco Park as things continue to ramp up for the start of this 2020 season. Let's dive into it. What's your message to this team as they start to come into Petco Park, just from a broad sense? What are we trying to get out of these next 3 weeks?
Well, first of all, it's going to be good getting everybody back together and seeing everybody. We've been communicating some through, phone, through Zoom, through FaceTime, and there's been a big portion of guys here, so it's just gonna be good seeing everybody. Obviously, we got a lot of protocols and things to go through, so that's probably first and probably most important, honestly, especially with just being responsible. We're going to have, some staff members and we certainly, the players, know people that, ultimately, our decisions and the way we take care of ourselves and all that is how it's going to affect people. So that's probably the first message. And then, getting back and getting to work, getting into the baseball action. And I think that's going to come naturally, pretty easy for the guys because they're excited for that.
Let me ask you a question that we've kicked around a little bit on the show in recent weeks. There might not be an answer to it, which is fine, of course. But the subject of position battles. I mean, we as broadcasters, media types, fans, whatever, during regular spring training, we talk a lot about that. And we probably oversimplify it to a great degree. But nonetheless, things like that can be decided during spring training in normal times. Can that happen now? Is there a way to evaluate now? Or is this more just about getting as many guys ready as is possible?
It's probably getting as many guys as ready as possible. And, we talked going into the year before all this that, we're going to need a big group of guys to help to contribute in order for us to go where we want to go. And that's probably even more so true now. We cannot predict, like what's going to happen. Just with the the COVID and all that, I'm equally concerned with injuries as well, whether that's leg injuries, obliques, arm injuries, with guys cranking up quickly. And when you're playing a 2-month season, a 6 or 8 week oblique injury could ultimately be your season. So just the importance of getting as many guys into game shape, into mid-season form as safely and as quickly as possible, I think is going to be a little bit more of our main objective.
How big of a challenge is that? These guys are the ultimate competitors. They're professional athletes. They want to go, full throttle all the time. I mean, that's pretty much how they are. Veteran guys probably understand it a bit more than younger guys, but what can be communicated to say, hey, we want to be thinking about the long term here?
We've had a lot of discussions on over the last couple months of if we get this opportunity, we believe we were going to get this opportunity, but what we needed to do. And so I think like the main thing is I feel very confident our group, we're going to be ready to go. We talked about it's going to be a short spring training. What are the things we need to do prior to all this? So ultimately we can get into inter squads earlier. We can face live pitchers. Our pitchers can face our hitters. We got to get running the bases. We got to get live reads. And so as a staff, we can only prepare or move as fast as our players are ready for it and as our players are prepared. And so I feel very confident we're going to be able to get up and running very early into camp.
You mentioned the pitching. How many thoughts and conversations have taken place in terms of the way the staff might be utilized and some of the different things you're probably going to end up having to do this year?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of our pitchers, whether they're in Arizona or whether here in San Diego, and a couple went home and we've been in touch with them. So, most of our guys are built up fairly well right now. But they're probably only going to get, if you're a starting pitcher, you may get 3 or 4 spring training starts and then the season goes. So I think it's safe to say, we're going to start with 30-man rosters instead of 26. We're probably going to carry some extra arms, and we're going to need all of those pitchers and those arms, helping out.
As a baseball nerd and a detail freak, I was kind of fascinated. One of the things that came up yesterday in your conference call with reporters about one of the things you'll be working on during these 3 weeks, which is stuff like where to sit in the dugout, because everything is so different now, and just sort of trying to make sure you're in compliance with the rules, but also that it makes sense. Take us through maybe some of the things you guys are going to be trying to figure out just in terms of like logistics that normally maybe you wouldn't give much thought to.
Yeah, whether it's myself, staff members, the players, we've all been, playing the game a certain way. and it's probably second nature. And now, going over some of the protocols, it may be only 4, 5, or 6 players in the dugout, in between innings. And so, where are guys going to sit? What are we going to do if we need a pinch hitter, a defensive replacement, a pinch runner? Where are those guys going to be lined up? And how quick can we get them ready and get them into the game? I think the pitchers, they're going to have to get used to not being able to go to their mouth. Are they going to use a wet rag and things like that? So I just think all the things, and again, like I stated yesterday, we don't have all the details yet. They're coming. We've read over some of them, more emails and more information. We're going to get some tonight. We're going to get some tomorrow. And then, as quickly as we can, read over them, best understand them, and then start implementing them into our spring training.
Last thing for you, with the spring training coming up, when we talk about it, when we refer to it, when we reference it, is it fair to say it's going to be very different than the normal spring training, putting the games aside? And I just saw a few minutes ago, it looks like there maybe going to be a couple of games at the end of the thing, either against a local team or against the team you're going to open up against. But aside from the game aspect of it, is it going to be wildly different than what we normally do just because of the constraints of the facility? Or are you going to try and make it as much like a normal spring training as possible?
I think we're going to do the best we can at making it normal. I think they're just going to be I think the biggest adjustments are going to be more in the clubhouse, not necessarily in the game. The game of baseball is still the same. We've got to throw the ball over the plate. We got to get barrel the ball. We've got to catch and throw the ball. I think all those things are, still, very close to the same. That's the beautiful part about baseball. I think the thing that's going to be different is, the rules in the clubhouse, and certainly coming in and the protocols before we're allowed in the clubhouse, getting your temperature taken, doing COVID test, making sure we're 6 feet away, not, hanging out in groups. So all those things I think is going to be different. I'm hoping, and I think I'm right on that, on this part, is that I think our normalcy or our enjoyment's going to come at that 7:00, 7:05 time when it's time to play the game. And the guys can just kind of double down on, the fundamentals of the game, what they know. And they got an opportunity to be, just kind of, a bunch of grown men playing a kid's game. And that's what, we all love about this game.
An escape for them the way it's an escape for us and all the fans who watch and listen. Makes sense. Jayce, really do appreciate it. Again, I know it's a little hectic there as you get ready for this. Good luck with everything. I'm sure we'll be talking soon, but thank you for hanging out and have a great start to summer camp next week.
Thank you, Jesse. And I enjoyed talking to you and look forward to next time as well.
That's the Padre manager, Jayce Tingler, and at some point, I guess in the next month, he will finally manage a game for the San Diego Padres. Don, I'm sure when he was dreaming of this opportunity, he didn't quite expect opening day in July, but that's 2020 for you.
No, it certainly didn't map it out this way, and especially where it had things going so well during spring training and getting used to the entire new team and getting used to being a manager in the big leagues. And it's been delayed, but it's going to happen, which is certainly exciting. And we're certainly looking forward to it. We'll step aside and come back with more on this Friar Friday right after this.
Welcome back to Friar Friday with Don Orsillo and Mark Grant. I'm Jesse Agler, having some fun talking about the upcoming 2020 season, and it actually is upcoming now. That is exciting. One of the guys who covers this game at the national level and provides a lot of insight is Scott Miller. I had the opportunity to catch up with Scotty earlier this week. Mud, you, me, Don, we cover the game in our own way, but he's one of these guys that seems to know everything about everything going on in the game.
You know what? I have a tremendous amount of respect for Scott Miller because he works so hard. Like, we talk about, Ken Rosenthal and Jeff Passan and Joel Sherman, all those guys working very, very hard, burning the midnight oil, if you will, to get information. And he's a very trustworthy writer. And I think it's another great thing for Scott to where over the past, 10, 15 years where sports writers have had a chance to be on TV and share that information. So I've got a tremendous amount of respect for Scott Miller. He's very well respected in the business and comes up with some good information, no doubt.
No doubt about it. He shared much of that information with us earlier this week on Padres Social Hour. Maybe a little bit too early to ask this because we don't have all the details. We don't have all the facts about, what it's going to be. But your sense, how much different is what we're ending up with here than what was sort of agreed to back in March? Because that was an agreement that happened very quickly, very easily, at least by comparison. How different is this than that?
Not much. I mean, that's the frustrating thing is that that agreement back then really was similar to where they ended up with Commissioner Manfred mandating the season. And, the frustrating thing, the only difference probably, Jesse, was, the owners, because they were losing so much money per home game with no fans, obviously they didn't want to pay the players the full prorated salary for that many games. They were hoping for 50 games or 60. I mean, Manfred could have implemented at 50. I think the owners, by the way, going to 60, that was a generous step they didn't have to do once we got to this point. But really, there isn't much difference from then to now. And the players ended up, all the players got out of all this, from what I can tell, is they've got that grievance in their back pocket that they surely are going to try to use. But a couple things on that, Jesse. One, I'm talking to a number of management sources. The owners are pretty confident that they have covered all their bases. They've dotted the I's, crossed the T's. They think they've negotiated in good faith. And, it seems like the paper trail is there. They offered an 82-game season, a 76-game season, and on, all the way up until a week ago when, Commissioner Manfred flew to Tony Clark's house, the players union boss in Arizona, and they negotiated some more. And, the players, by bypassing everything, they end up with the right to file this grievance, but they also lost out on a lot of other things, including they won't even be paid for the postseason now. A lot of people might not realize how that works, but you've heard of, World Series, winner shares, loser shares, same with ALCS, NLCS. How the players get paid, that's strictly on ticket sales in the first 4 games of a best of 7 series. So the ticket sales for the first 4 games of the World Series, that's what money goes to the players. Well, there won't be any fans in the stands. So the owners at one point in their offered $25 million out of the postseason pool to the players, and they declined that. And so now where they end up is, like I say, they have a right to file the grievance, but that playoff, they'll end up playing for free. And there are a few other things which, we don't need to spend the next hour going over all the business arrangements, but there are a few other things the players passed on to reject the offer. So, yeah, this whole thing just didn't have to be this hard or drag on this long.
What do you think are some of the long-term implications of everything that's gone on the last couple of months? And I mean that from like the temperature of fans, fan interest, CBA, really any direction you want to go. I imagine there will be some dominoes here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a number of, just anecdotally speaking, talking to friends, neighbors, a lot of people are, as you would guess, teed off at baseball. They're sick of hearing about all this. So to the question of how much damage did baseball do to the fans or to its base, it's hard to say because like the immediate measuring rod would be attendance, right? Well, when baseball starts in late July, let's see what damage they may or may not have done to the fans. What's the attendance going to be? But with nobody allowed in the ballpark, it doesn't really matter anyway. So the fans will be home watching. And then from there, like a lot of things, I think time will probably heal some of the wounds. But I think this, Jesse, however we measured what damage may or may not have been done to the game, I think a lot of that's going to hinge on this collective bargaining agreement because it's right around the corner. It expires after the 2021 season. And I think if a lot of fans may be uh, teed off now about having to listen to this and kind of feel like they've been dragged through the mud, but if the next basic agreement gets done and there's no work stoppage in 2022, I think that'll go a long way toward making people forget about this. But if there is a big work stoppage, that's, I think, going to be catastrophic for the game. But one other thing on that, the tone between the owners and players right now obviously is not good. And, there's a lot of animosity on both sides. Players don't trust the owners. Owners don't think the players union, among other things, gave the proper information to the players. Yeah, I mean, there's talk that Scott Boras involved himself in the negotiations and overstepped his bounds, and in that the union as a whole maybe misrepresented some things to the players. So, but against all that, the bad blood back and forth, there's one thing to remember. Both sides are losing so much money right now this summer that one question to ask and one thing to remember is when they go into the basic agreement negotiations, the question is, can the owners and players then themselves afford a shutdown again in 2022 after losing so much money this year? And so, in a weird way, that could end up, despite the animosity between the two sides, the common denominator, as it often is in so many human cases, is money, and people don't want to lose it. And that you lose all that money now and then play next year, but then are you going to be prepared to lose a ton of money again in 2022?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and you're right. Something I hadn't thought about. Let's talk about some actual baseball. That would be nice. What fascinates you? Assuming 60 games here, we always say baseball is a marathon, not a sprint. This year, it'll very much be a sprint. We're going to have different rosters. Probably pitching will be used differently. All kinds of things. No minor league feeder system in a traditional sense. Perhaps extra inning rules, that sort of stuff. What are you looking forward to from just sort of I'm fascinated by this standpoint.
The one thing is that the old cliche that the game's a marathon, not a sprint, that gets turned on its head right out of the gate. Opening day, essentially, excuse me, is more than just opening day. It's the first day of the stretch run, the pennant race, because you're only playing 60 games. There's no time to have one or two bad weeks. So the urgency is going to be there every night. And I was doing some math today, Jesse, which is always dangerous because whenever I try to do math, sometimes it doesn't go well. But if I'm 60 games out of the percentage of the 162 game season that 60 games is, if I did things right, I think each individual game now will be worth, I think it's 2.7 games of a 162 game season. So each game is more than twice as important as during the regular normal circumstances. And if you take that out to the full week, each week worth of games, if say, the Padres or whomever it is plays 6 games in a week, that'll be like 16 or 17 games worth in a regular season. So right away, the urgency is there. Every single game is so important. So, I think, that's going to be interesting. You always look at flukes and teams. I think teams that are really deep, like the Dodgers, that depth is built for a 6-month season. That doesn't guarantee anything over 60 games. I mean, I looked, again, if you look at the season last year and the year before, and especially take the year before, 2018, if you cut the season off at the 60 game mark, just play it out April, May to June 4th, Arizona wins the National League West, not the Dodgers. But more interestingly, and this shows you how flukes could happen, also in 2018, after 60 games, the winner of the American League West is the Seattle Mariners. They were 2 games ahead of Houston, and Seattle they're the longest drought in baseball. They haven't made the playoffs since 2001. Yet after 60 games 2 years ago, they would have won the division.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely one would think going to be some stuff like that to happen, or at least almost happen, where, I don't know, the Marlins or the Pirates, somebody comes out of nowhere and is playing meaningful baseball late in September if they can keep everybody healthy. That's another subject for another day. We've taken enough of your time. Really appreciate it, Scott Miller. Bleacher Report, Fox Sports San Diego, everything else. Enjoy, hopefully soon, the start of baseball, Scott.
Jesse, you too. And as I've been telling people all summer, man, I hope to see you at the ballpark sometime soon, sooner than later.
Always great to hear from Scott Miller. We'll come back with more of this Friar Friday right after this. Welcome back to Friar Friday. Well, certainly a good draft for the San Diego Padres. Boy, they've had some great drafts over the last couple of years. Robert Hassel III, the first-round draft choice this year for the Padres. He has signed. You never know if you're going to be able to sign your first-round draft choice. They signed others as well. Justin Lang is on that list as he signs as well as part of 5 that signed this week. Owen Casey signing with the Padres, getting that name on the contract as well, as Levi Thomas is now a San Diego Padre, as well as Jagger Haynes signing on Wednesday. So an exciting time for all of these guys. And certainly, Mud, you never know about that first-round guy, whether you're going to be able to sign him or not. This is big for the Padres.
It's huge for every organization. And the only things that I have to say about this is that the pressure, the stress as an amateur, if you're going to get drafted and then you get signed by your club to get in the organization, when they're going to start playing organized games, whatever the case may be, the minor leagues back up again, who knows? But that's the things I look at as an individual being drafted. Where am I going to get drafted? Now that I'm drafted by this ball club, I am signed, I'm in the organization. I think it's a tremendous relief off the minds and the shoulders of these youngsters. Let's start playing some baseball and start my path to the big leagues.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Whatever that path might be, guys, here in 2020, like you said, Mudcat, it could be a little bit weird and different. But again, what isn't weird and different here in 2020? We all follow baseball really, really closely. It's literally our livelihood, our jobs. But one of my blind spots, I think, is amateur baseball. It's just hard to focus a lot on the college and high school game when we're focusing as much attention on the pro game as we are. And so it's really nice to be able to know people like Carlos Collazo of Baseball America, because his entire job revolves around covering the draft. And earlier this week, we checked in to find out a little bit more about this 2020 Padres draft class. Pleased to check in with a very familiar face and name to Padre fans. Helped cover the Padres alongside AJ Cassavell of Padres.com back in 2016. Now a national baseball writer for Baseball America, focusing on the draft. And we saw him all over MLB Network during the draft a couple of weeks ago. Carlos Collazo, first of all, man, lovely to see you. Wonderful job on TV. What was that experience like for you?
Well, thank you. It was fun. It was a lot. It was a lot different than most years. Obviously, it was weird being in a studio with no one in there around you and everyone in face masks. So it was kind of an eerie feeling actually being in studio. But talking about the draft and kind of seeing it all unfold after we've spent a year plus for some players, kind of breaking them down and figuring them out, is always exciting. It's always fun to see how it actually pans out after we've been projecting and kind of feeling out where players fit and what teams are attacking which players. It's always nice just to see it actually happen and then go from there. But it was a fun draft despite it being short. I think this year's draft class was the deepest draft that I've covered since I've been at Baseball America. So it's disappointing that it's only a 5-round draft, I think, for the scouting departments, for the players, definitely for the college coaches as well. But it was fun to see, and it's a draft that we're all going to look back on for a long time and kind of wonder about, I think, as we see how these players pan out and the players who didn't get drafted, how they pan out in future years.
What did you think about the 5-round thing going into it, and did you feel any differently coming out of it?
I think disappointment is probably the word that comes to mind. Most of the scouts that I talked to, the scouting directors, front office officials, they obviously wanted more rounds. Just from their perspective, it's what their guys are working on the entire year. This is their chance to kind of put some impact talent in a system. And I think anytime you take away draft rounds, scouts are going to be disappointed. So I think it's pretty easy for me to kind of fall in that bucket as well as someone who covers the draft. full time, like you were talking about. I think anytime you make it shorter, it's a little bit more disappointing. There are talented players who could have gone in the 6 to 10 round range this year that would have become big league players. So again, I don't know if it's just tough to say now. We'll have to see how it pans out, but I think just disappointing with such a great draft class and such a deep draft class. Really the second and third tier of players are stronger this year than I've ever seen it. And we didn't really get to see that play out in the draft. I think there are plenty of teams who are in a situation now where they would love to add some talent to their farm system. Maybe the Padres are under the opposite side of that spectrum in that they have plenty of talent now. But all these guys really want to add as much talent as possible. And whenever you limit that, I think it's a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the consensus around baseball. Let's talk Padres. What did you make of the draft? Obviously, 5 rounds, 6 picks. It's kind of easy to recap. We don't have to go guy by guy here. We've already done that on the show. But your overall feelings on what they're able to put together.
Yeah, the past few years, I've really liked what the Padres have done in the draft. I feel like they're just a team that isn't afraid of risk. They're not afraid of the security of different demographics. They're not afraid to go for some players who maybe more teams that are a bit more analytically driven would maybe steer away from just because of the history of certain position types or profiles. I think that Padres really target upside aggressively, and I appreciate that. It seems like they really scout for tools and don't really mind the risk that might be associated with some of their players. I mean, they got the best pure hitter in the high school class, and that player traditionally has done really well. It's a player that I think in hindsight we might have had ranked a little bit too low in Robert Hassel. Just the best all-around hitter in the high school class. I think that was a solid pick, and they saved a little bit of money on him and were able to spread that around throughout their draft class. I think Cole Wilcox, who they got in the 3rd round, might be one of the best values in the entire draft. We saw him as a no-doubt first-round type of arm, a draft-eligible sophomore out of Georgia with really impact stuff, and to get him in the 3rd round when we saw him as a guy who could go in the 20s on talent is a phenomenal steal. Justin Lang, a guy who has some of the best pure arm talent in the class. I think he kind of hits that exact profile of a guy who has tremendous upside, but quite a bit of risk. And the fact that the Padres aren't afraid to go get a guy like that and see if they can develop him into an impact type of arm at the next level is exciting. And I think as a Padres fan, it's kind of nice to see that your team targets that sort of talent consistently and relentlessly. And just to see them go for talent at every pick, where you see some teams went for some money savers early, and you can have different strategies. Maybe you go really high end at the top, but the Padres really got talent at every slot. And I think their class is pretty exciting because of that.
Carlos Collazo, Baseball America, covers the draft, covered the Padres back in 2016 for MLB.com. What about the farm system overall now for the Padres? Obviously, you start graduating guys like Fernando Tatis Jr. You expect the rankings to go down, but still top to bottom. How do we feel about the system?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the better systems in baseball. It's one of the deeper systems. I think the Padres and the Rays, for me, are the 2 deepest farm systems in the game right now. And I think nothing about this draft, how it panned out, will really change that. Obviously, that might change as we kind of get some of these guys graduating. But I feel like they have a great collection of talent at the upper levels and in the lower levels of the minor leagues. I mean, the guy on the wall behind me, Mackenzie Gore, is one of the most exciting prospects in baseball for me. And I think he's going to be a phenomenal pitcher. But really, there are not a lot of holes to speak of in the Padres system just on talent. I think it's hard to argue them as not a top 2, top 3 system in the game.
A lot of conversation has been had lately about guys like Mackenzie Gore, Luis Patino, sort of those upper level prospects who are perhaps going to find major league time this year under normal circumstances. Obviously, with everything being weird and different here in 2020, their situation could change dramatically. What about, though, the guys who are not kind of busting towards the big leagues at this particular moment? I'm thinking in particular perhaps of a CJ Abrams, but anybody else, a guy that was drafted last year or that maybe was targeted to go to single A to start this season, who there are very real expectations for. We don't really know anything about what minor league baseball is or isn't going to look like this year, aside from the fact that it won't be normal. Mm-hmm. How are teams going to continue to develop the talent that isn't necessarily big league ready, you think?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest questions that all these teams are still working through. I don't know if I have a great answer, but I do know that having 1 year loss of development time, I feel like is really limiting for what these guys need to be working on. I mean, all these guys are in stages of their development where you need regular at-bats, you need regular innings in the field defensively, whether that's a guy like Abrams who needs to put in some work defensively to stick at shortstop, or whether that's a prospect that needs to work on pitch recognition or some mechanics of their swing or pitchers on the mound. I mean, you can't replicate the game looks that you get in a minor league season. And it'll be interesting to see how teams kind of tackle that without a minor league season to be had. What kind of instructs do they do? Are they able to replicate those real game situations via scrimmages or other kind of instruct scenarios? Because, I mean, we've seen some players. So I'll take a draft example. A guy like Bryce Jarvis, he didn't play in any games last summer, but still managed to get much, much better as a prospect and as a player. So I think with where player development is at now, with kind of the data and the analytics and the quick feedback loop you have, particularly for pitchers, I think it might be okay. You might be able to find ways to improve or add another pitch or just improve the pitches you have now outside of a game environment. But I do think that there are plenty of skills, soft skills and hard skills, that you just can't get outside of real baseball games. So whenever we can get back to that, will help all of these guys. And it'll be interesting to see just how their development paths are affected because of this year. But I guess the good news is, from a team perspective, everyone's kind of affected equally here. Everyone's on the same playing field and trying to work through it at the same level.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's something I'm fascinated by. Again, as you said, there's only so much you can do without game scenarios. And I think drawing a distinction between pitchers and position players is a good one. Maybe even contact guys and power guys. Who knows? We could probably do an hour just on this topic. We won't do that, though. Carlos, great to see you, man. It's been a little while. And thanks for the time and the insight, and congrats on all your success.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always fun talking baseball, and it's especially fun talking draft. So thanks for having me.
Well, we can't wait to see Robert Hassell III, the first-round pick for the San Diego Padres. We'll step aside on this Friar Friday and come back with more right after this. Welcome back to this Friar Friday. Don Orsillo along with Grant and Jesse Agler. Well, last week, the San Diego Padres made a very special announcement. The Padres Foundation has pledged to donate $19,000 in honor of the memory of Tony Gwynn. They partner with the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce to award grants to small businesses from $250 to $2,000. The Padres invite fans and other San Diego-based businesses to join them in this financial support and financially supporting this cause with www.reliefgrant.sdblackchamber.org. So you have a chance to be involved as well. And Mud, we talked a little bit about it last week, how important this is to keep it local, to keep it right here in San Diego.
Big fan. We know all about the big chains and everything, but keeping it local here in San Diego and helping out those businesses, I think it's great that the Padres are doing this during the times that's going on right now. So good on the San Diego Padres and staying local, and to a way for us to support the local.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Mud. And Donna DeBerry is the woman who heads up that Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce. She and I had the opportunity to catch up this week to talk about this program and everything that's going on here in town. Donna, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time here this evening. Let's start with the work that you do at the Chamber. Tell us a little bit about that, and furthermore, the work that the Chamber does for our community here in San Diego.
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited. Of course, I made sure I wore the right appropriate attire to show my commitment. Absolutely. Our mission at the San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce is really to create generational wealth through business enterprise, education, employment, and investing. And our goal is to support the business, career, and financial success of our chamber members, which really does result in economic empowerment of our communities. So we utilize very innovative programs, networking opportunity, business partnerships to advance and strengthen inclusive economic development through the city and the county of San Diego.
Obviously, a lot going on right now in the world. I suppose that's putting it very mildly. What has it been like for the businesses you work with these last few weeks, going back to when the shutdowns and the lockdowns started, through obviously the social unrest we've seen in the wake of the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis and all the people taking to the streets kind of in the wake of that?
Yeah, I tell you, when COVID-19 burst into the Black community, Black-owned businesses were hit faster and harder than any other business. And we are at a critical pivot for the Black community as it relates to our health, our business, our livelihood, and all the social unrest that's happening right now. This is like a crisis on top of a crisis. Just to give you perspective, 95% of Black-owned businesses were denied PPP, and despite the rollout of all the federal, state, and local efforts to provide support to the small business community, the Black businesses were overlooked and disqualified, and many of them were, like I said, disproportionately left out of stimulus money. So they've been shut out the process for loans and grants in the city, and there's been many historical practices and policies and inequities that are negatively impacting our businesses from receiving this financial help that they need.
What can we do moving forward? What's the chamber doing, helping locally with the businesses here in San Diego?
Yeah. So right now we've all been talking about how we're flattening this curve, the COVID curve. Well, now is the time that we also need to flatten the economic disparity curve. And how we're doing that is by providing financial support to our businesses so that we can create this community economic stimulus that will help the most vulnerable businesses recover, reopen, and rebuild. So in response to this challenge, and in partnership with grant makers, we created the Black Business Relief Grant Fund. And what we did is we developed a blueprint that lays out a short and long-term strategy that will support these historical, underfunded, and underrepresented businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19 and some of the social and economic injustices. We also are very smart about it. We've partnered our grants with business development and trainings so that we can continue to provide business skills and encourage business growth. So here's what we're doing. We aim to raise $1 million in 60 days. And we've kicked off this fundraiser on June the 10th. And really because a lot of Eric and Tom's efforts, we are at 250K. I can tell you that the media has been a huge partner in outreach and story opportunities. These resources are going to impact the most vulnerable communities in some of the most distressed neighborhoods.
Really nice to see the Padres getting involved. There was, I know, last week a $19,000 donation. That number 19, of course, very significant here in the Padre community. I was thrilled to see that. How much has that helped kind of kick things off for you guys?
Oh, that kicked it off. I can't tell you enough. You know, when you think about why we partner with the Padres, it's because really this magical power that I talk about. It brings these, communities together, their children, their families. And baseball also teaches our children patience and critical thinking, sportsmanship, honesty, loyalty, and courage through baseball. And really, more importantly, I say that it really teaches our children, especially in the Black community, the love for the game. And so when we as a chamber look for partnerships, we are always looking for organizations that show a commitment to communities of color and a strong, bold, inclusive leadership, like the president of the Padres, Eric Grubner, and Tom Seidler. They are amazing. And the Padre team, their leadership and ownership demonstrates not only their commitment to communities of color, but also real leadership qualities and competencies like empathy and awareness and healing and community building, and really the commitment to the growth of others. So I'm so excited that the Padres are our partner, and I look forward to a long-term partnership.
No, Donna, like I said, it's exciting to be able to hear that. And the hope always, whenever we have a conversation like this with someone, is that there are folks who are watching and listening and they say to themselves, man, I'd like to get involved. I would like to help. I would like to participate in some way or another. What are some of the things those of us just community members at large can do to help? Websites, information, donations, volunteer opportunities, anything that might exist?
All of the above. The outpour has been overwhelming from all the businesses, individuals, just organizations. It has been amazing. And you can go to, there's two places. You can go to San Diego Grant Makers site to donate, or sdblackchamber.org to donate. It's critically important. We welcome all these contributions. We're going to be taking these donations through August the 31st. And again, $1 million in 60 days. Please help us get there so that we can continue to help Black-owned businesses reopen and rebuild. No amount's too small. They really do need our attention and our services as we all work through this recovery right now. And so I can't tell you, we are all committed. We should all be committed to contribute to the vibrant economic and cultural landscape of San Diego.
Oh, so great. Wonderful message. Wonderful work you're doing, obviously, on behalf of so many of the critical businesses here in our community. Donna DeBerry from the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for being here with us, for providing that information. And we'll continue to distribute that info as much as we can to try and get as many people involved as possible.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It always goes by so fast. Another Friar Friday has come to an end, Mud. It's just like that, and it's over.
Oh, it's so much fun. Got to go.
All right. For Jesse Agler over there on the other side, Mark Grant in the middle, I'm Don Orsillo. That's it for Friar Friday. Have a good night, everybody.